Leading U.S. presidential candidates have been featured on the Nowman Show. Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, Dennis Kucinich, Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, and Howie Hawkins.
This is not utopian dreaming. At the end of the day, the 1%, and I deal with them every day, they are enormously powerful. They influence what goes on television. They own the TV. They own the newspapers. All right? They own our economy. They own our political system with massive campaign contributions. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. We are 99%. If we keep our eyes on the prize of creating the kind of humane society we can become, if we are prepared to get deeply involved in the political process, if we are prepared to tell our friends and neighbors that we're tired of hearing them complain, that they have got to get involved in the political process. Brothers and sisters, if we do all of that, we can create an extraordinary country that the whole world will be looking to for leadership.
We are the owners and shareholders of this country. We should get a dividend, and that would put more workers in position to become owners of various businesses.
And the more we develop those kinds of businesses like solar and wind and hydropower, I mean, it becomes obvious this is the commons that we all actually, we're building this wealth that you were talking about. We all built together. You know, even if some people are out of work for a while, everybody contributed to this for decades or however long, you know what I mean? So we should be able to get something back, and the wealth should not, this great wealth that's been created should not be going primarily to the top. It's something like 80% now. I think the system needs to reorganize the structure so that wealth is distributed differently in the first place. Yes. Don't you agree?
And the most effective way to do that is through something like universal basic income, to build what I call the trickle-up economy, yes, from people and families and communities up. And there are, frankly, relatively few paths to try and build that economy. And in my opinion, everyone's going to understand very quickly that the fastest, most direct, and successful path there is going to involve just putting money into people's hands.
I don't think that we can arrange the challenges in which we face in terms of what's a priority. Everything's important. We have to think holistically about those challenges. So the degradation of the planet, it should concern all of us. War and the United States unbearable imperialism, that's a problem. Trade laws that don't allow for workers' rights, human rights, environmental quality principles. We need to change that. There are the fact that so many young people can't get a decent education. All of these things should concern us, and we have to have the ability to be able to hold multiple goals simultaneously and pursue a newer world without saying, well, first we got to take care of this and then we take care of that. No, there's so many different things that we have to work on simultaneously, and I think we're capable of doing that.
Hello, Tulsi. Hi,
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Aloha.
Aloha. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. The Nowman Show based out of Pasadena.
It's getting rid of the influence of big money and Wall Street money in Washington that has stopped real reform from taking place to break up the big banks and to hold those responsible for gambling with our futures. That still hasn't happened. It is only we the people that can demand and hold leaders accountable in order to make this kind of change.
And we have to love each other and radically show that to each other.
Exactly.
And you can do that for us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. We're going to walk around here for a minute.
Hello, Mr. Kennedy. My name is Dan Niswander, independent media from Pasadena, also KPFK FM's Rebel Alliance News. I'm the grandson of Swiss immigrants, and I know you mentioned that most of the people coming across the border were coming because of money and not because of political asylum. I know my grandparents came here because they wanted a new life here in the United States. That being said, the U.S. Congressional Budget Office own report that they released last year, from 1989 to 2019, the bottom 50% of the population, economically, was sharing 2% of the wealth. So we have to deal with these issues, and when there is a Kennedy administration, are we going to see a sequel to the New Deal, new jobs programs, regulating Wall Street, securing Social Security? What do you intend to do once you are President of the United States?
I'm a traditional Kennedy Democrat. I think the human dignity, and particularly dignity of the workers, and the American middle class are the foundation stones not only of our economy but American democracy. I grew up in a period in American history that economists call the Great Prosperity. It was a period of approximately 50 years, 40 to 50 years following World War II, when the American middle class became the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. So at the time that I was a young man, our country owned half the wealth on the face of the earth, and the American middle class was flourishing. We were producing products that everybody in the world wanted. People, when I went abroad, people would do anything to buy Levi jeans that I was wearing. People wanted American cars. In Europe, I traveled a lot with my father and my mother when I was little, and they wanted our electronics. RCA Victrola and radios, and transistor radios, all these things that we had invented. And we were beloved around the world. People loved the United States of America. When I went in 1964, I went to Poland with my dad. Poland at that point was a communist country. And the communists were, my father went without permission from the government. We got the visa across the border. The Polish government, communist government, didn't want us there, and they were doing everything to make sure that the state-controlled press did not report our presence in the country. They never did. And in fact, one day we went to take a bunch of presents that we brought from the United States to an orphanage in Warsaw, and the government had removed all the orphans by the time we got there. So, and we went to Krakow to meet the cardinal, who was everybody knew that he was a saint. He'd been tortured and jailed by the communists, and he's an extremely reverential, pious man and an inspiration. He had inspired a resurgence in the Catholic Church in Poland, and we went to his residence, to the Cathedral of Black Madonna in Krakow. And we were waiting for him, to meet this guy. Nobody knew we were there, except people saw us when we went in. And when we came out, there were over 1 million people in the plaza outside the cathedral. And they surrounded our car. We were on the embassy vehicle, and my father got us all to crawl out the window. We stood on the top of the car. And I was, 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid at that time. And all I did all afternoon was sign autographs for people. And they shook our car. They sang Sto Lat to us, which means may you live forever. It's kind of a national song, an anthem of Poland. People were crying. This wave of emotion was extraordinary because they loved the United States. We were a moral authority around the world. And all of that was taken out of the growth of the American middle class. And every social scientist will tell you that without a middle class, you cannot have democracy. In nations where there's large disparities of wealth, of great wealth above, and an understory of widespread poverty below, is an economic configuration that's too unstable to support democracy. You need a middle class to have democracy, and we are losing the middle class in this country. And we need, I'm running for president because that is going to be the focus of everything I do, to restore the American middle class, the economy, the good health, the end of the war economy, which is draining our country, the closure of these bases, and around the world and bring that money home and rebuild America.
Why is it so important that we vote in this election? Because, recently I talked to a man who was 102 years old. He voted for FDR, and I know why he voted. Why should we be voting in 2016?
Well, in this election, we're not just deciding what kind of a world we're going to have, but whether we're going to have a world or not going forward, considering the climate crisis that's barreling down on us, these wars for oil that have no end, the war on terror, which is only creating more terror, and 2,000 nuclear weapons which are on hair trigger alert, a generation of young people that's locked in debt. The list goes on and on. The Democrats and the Republicans, Hillary and Donald, are not talking about what the real problems are. They're talking about, where was Obama born? They're talking about, when did Donald take what position on Iraq? They're doing everything they can to avoid the real problems. Unfortunately, they agree with each other too much. Donald may not believe in climate change, and Hillary may say that she does, but their actions amount to the same thing. Donald supports coal, Hillary supports fracking. Either one is going to do us in. They both are competing for who's the bigger militarist, who's going to squander more of our scarce resources on these wars that are making us less safe, not more safe, and neither one is talking about the nuclear weapons crisis. We need to be ending nuclear weapons and moving as fast as we can to nuclear disarmament. So, it's really important that we not be intimidated. They want us to be good little boys and girls and to take marching orders from the political pundits and the party operatives who are telling us, that we are powerless, it's hopeless, and resistance is futile. They're telling us because they are quaking in their boots because there's a voter revolt going on. The majority of people now are actually calling for a new and independent third party, and the vast majority of voters are saying they want the debates opened up because they don't like and they don't trust Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They're clamoring for something else. This is that something else. So we need to break through here for the future we deserve.
How can we create a process to where there can be independent candidates in a public debate, where you're on the stage with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton? And can that even be done in 2016?
Well, in my view, yes, it can. We have fought our way into closed debates before at the state level. I have fought my way into governor's debates and, in fact, was then voted winner of that debate on an instant online viewer poll, at which time I was yanked out of the debates because they are quaking in their boots that we, the people, actually do have the power. And the way we fought our way in was to just gather a huge, unruly, loud crowd that was not going to take no for an answer. In America, we not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know who we can vote for.
And you are obviously a medical doctor. What is the best way going forward to get a single payer in this country? Most countries have that, and we need it too.
Exactly. We need it, and we can afford it, in fact, because it doesn't cost any more than what we are paying right now. It simply ensures that our healthcare dollars are paying for healthcare, not for health profiteering. We need a healthcare system that is established for people, not for making profit. So again, this is all a matter of achieving critical mass. We need to come together as the many movements we are for health justice, for climate justice, for racial and economic and LGBT justice, and women's justice. When we get together with the courage of our convictions, we're unstoppable. Just on student debt alone, there are 43 million young people locked into debt. And the well-kept secret is this is a winning plurality of the vote. Just young people in debt alone are enough to come out and take over this election. So we, in fact, do have the power. It's time to stand up and use it. The future is within our reach.
One of the things that concerns a lot of us, millions of people actually, are out of work, they're underemployed, they're re-unemployed, which you know what that is. You've talked about the Green New Deal and also an emergency jobs program. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes, we actually have an economic emergency. The recovery has really been at the top. For most Americans, it's a struggle, and the jobs that have come back are low-wage, part-time, temporary jobs. The average wages for workers are barely above poverty. So we want to tell it like it is. We have a jobs emergency, and we have a climate emergency. We can only fix them together. So we call for the creation of 20 million jobs, like the New Deal, where we created millions of jobs in a matter of months, actually. This time, those jobs will also transition our economy to clean, renewable energy, to a healthy, local organic food system, and to public transportation. It turns out we also get healthy in the process here, because if you clean up the pollution that kills 200,000 people a year, and we have healthy food, and we've got public transportation, it's like, what's not to love about this picture? In fact, it pays for itself just in the savings in healthcare alone, and it also makes wars for oil obsolete once we've greened our energy system. So this is like an emergency program that will revive our economy, and it will put an end to climate change, and it will end the crisis of unemployment and joblessness for once and for all. It basically creates the right to a job at a living wage.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will ask, how is that going to get paid for?
So it turns out we get so much healthier by getting rid of this polluting energy that we save enough money that it takes about a decade or so to pay back the cost of the transition. So yes, there's an investment here, but it's an investment that pays back right away. We spend $3 trillion a year right now on our sick care system. It's not a healthcare system, because we make ourselves sick with the pollution, a bad food system, and a passive transportation system. So just by creating a real structure for health, we get so much healthier, we save so much money that alone pays the cost. Also, with a green economy, we don't need the wars for oil. We don't need to have 1,000 bases in over 100 countries around the world. A military that's eating up over half of our discretionary budget, and has just brought us failed states and mass refugee migrations and worse terrorist threats. So we need to cut that bloated and dangerous military budget and put our dollars into true security here at home, creating a jobs program that will also cure our climate and give us a future that we deserve.
What do you think about the idea of worker cooperatives and even the equivalent of a small business administration that would provide resources and services in the same way that they have with capitalistic corporations, but do it for worker cooperatives that are done in a more democratic fashion? What are your thoughts about that?
We're on exactly the same page here, because this is part of the program that we've called for in a Green New Deal, is to promote a cooperative economy. So the Green New Deal provides subsidies and grants for small businesses, but also for worker cooperatives and community cooperatives and nonprofits, and it establishes an office of the cooperative economy, because we're used to this old kind of economy based on greed and selfishness. We need an economy that works for all of us, that's based on the golden rule, if you will.
I love it.
Yeah, and so we need help. People need help establishing worker cooperatives and getting them up and running.
Democracy and compassion.
The final third-party presidential debate, produced by the Free and Equal Foundation, took place Wednesday night in Hollywood, with David Walker, founder of No Labels, and Free and Equal's founder Christina Tobin moderating. It was a lively and informative night with Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party, Chase Oliver of the Libertarian Party, and Randall Terry of the Constitution Party. The subject of economics was the predominant topic of discussion, focusing on debts, especially the multi-trillion-dollar student loan debt, and the deficit. Other topics were healthcare, housing, Social Security, national disaster relief, independent parties, electoral reform, and foreign policy. At one point, discussion got heated with the subject of Palestine and Israel. Here are some highlights.
The question is, why do you think we had so much excess inflation? And what would you do to try to make sure that we don't repeat it? And we start with Chase Oliver.
Well, as I've said before, government debt and deficit spending is the primary driver of inflation. And yeah, you guys remember when we got that $1,200 check for COVID? Does it feel like it was worth the same $1,200 that it is today? No, it's because we printed trillions of dollars out of thin air and it made that money worth less and less and less. That's the pinch we're feeling. If you're wondering why it took place just after the COVID spending, that's why we had to jump up to 9.1%. This is why we cannot allow governments to continue to run records, debt, and deficit. If you want to balance the budget, stop supporting politicians who advocate spending more each and every year that we take in.
Dr. Stein.
I think that drilling is the answer. Get ready for a whole lot more hurricanes, get ready for a whole lot more drought, which, by the way, is going to raise the price of food, which is a major driver of inflation here. We need a holistic system here. And let me just say that some of the most useful things we can do would be to address the desperate shortages that are driving up prices in housing, and we talked about that before, about how to basically stabilize the rising cost of housing, which is a major contributor to overall inflation and the desperate economic circumstances of our families and communities. We need rent control. We need to build out environmentally sound and cluster housing so that it is not contributing to sprawl and more traffic and more energy consumption and pollution and drought and inflation because of our food supply, et cetera. This is a complex system and we need to do thoughtful planning. But there are ways we can address housing that's going to be helpful all around. Healthcare, as I mentioned before, we can drastically reduce the cost of healthcare through a Medicare for All system, and we can ensure that we have a sustainable food system and that we address the climate crisis driving drought, which is a major contributor to the climate crisis. So we can ensure that we have a food supply and we are enabling American families to meet their needs. We can also raise the minimum wage.
Thank you so much for the privilege of being here. The Constitution Party nominated me, Randall Cherry, to be their presidential candidate. Our party is unique in that, number one, we strive to base everything that we do and believe and promote on the Constitution. It's not an antiquated document, it's the governing document of this country. But beyond that, we strive to build everything that we say and do, our policies, literally the foundation of culture and society, upon the Judeo-Christian ethic given to us through Moses and Christ. If anyone thinks that they're smarter, wiser, more just, more fair, more merciful, run from that person. Karl Marx, whoever they are, run away.
In reality, the government has over $125 trillion in total liabilities and unfunded social insurance obligations. Interest is our second largest expense. It's past defense and it's past Medicare, and it's growing rapidly. What steps would you take to put our federal finances in order, because they're clearly out of control?
I'm going to give the most stark answer that I can. Number one, I don't know. And the reason I'm going to be honest is because no one in the history of the human race has had a debt ratio like we have, debt to income ratio. It's never been done. Number two, we're functioning under fiat currency. The only reason that the dollar is still the currency of refuge for most of the world is because of oil.
For one thing, we need to cut the military budget. You add in the Veterans Administration, taking care of our wounded veterans, which we need to do, the nuclear power, and so on. The FBI, ICE, etc. It comes to more like 60 or 65%, which doesn't leave much for the American people. So we need to start cutting the military budget, cut it by at least half.
I want to say I agree with Jill Stein that we need to cut the Pentagon by at least 50%. And I want to agree with Randall Terry that we might be too far gone to actually fix this problem. And I'm ready to say my generation, the millennial generation, has already been shafted enough. We're willing to take the pain so that it doesn't go on to Generation Z, Gen Alpha, and everyone afterwards. It's time for us to be realistic, to be adults in the room and say government does too much, spends too much, and we have to cut the spending. And that's exactly what we've seen in a nation like Argentina that had a huge debt ratio, and we're seeing an actual turnaround.
If you look at Argentina, and I'm glad, Chase, you brought up Argentina, you know, an example of a libertarian government. I think it's the only one I know of. There may be others out there, but I'm not aware of them. You know, we're seeing at what shock therapy looks like, what public austerity and deregulation looks like. And from what I've heard about this and read recently, the poverty rates are up about 57%.
Our birth rate is only 1.62, which means we would have a declining population without immigration.
The Democrat Party knows that at some point in time, a general amnesty is inevitable if they're in power. And when that general amnesty happens, polling data shows that 80% of illegal immigrants will register as Democrats. There's a huge Hispanic population here illegally will suddenly flip from being Republican states to being
Democrat states.
Because 99.9% of people just want to come here and work, and if you create a simplified system for them to do that, they will enter that system. And then you can focus on those who are committing human trafficking or other violations of liberty and actually crack down on those. Walls do not work either, because if you create a 20-foot wall, you're going to have 20-foot ladders being sold south of the border. They do not work, and they steal people's land via eminent domain, which is the theft of people's land by government without their permission. And that has happened on our southern border. That has happened during the Trump border wall building. Walls are bad, immigration is good, and let's support the 21st century Ellis Island here in the United States.
Gaza, all the universities, and 2/3 of all hospitals have been destroyed. Despite this, the U.S. government continues to send billions of dollars in military aid to Israel, allegedly in support of Jewish safety. Do you support Israel as a Jewish state? And if not, how would you keep Jewish people safe? Brandon.
I support the Jewish state. The loss of life in Gaza is horrific. It hasn't happened in real time in front of a camera like this for decades. And we all wish that people weren't dying. The problem is this: Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, all of them followed the words and the teachings of Muhammad and his early companions. And when you hear in their constitutions, all of them say that they will wipe Israel off the face of the earth. That's not something they came up with recently. That comes from the heart and soul and the founding of Islam itself. Wholesale rape, pedophilia, the outright theft of entire villages. Once the sword is taken away, the death sentence taken away for leaving Islam, Islam will die of its own weight. And until then, it is a threat, and Israel has the right to do what it can to eradicate the leadership of Hezbollah and Hamas and the rest of them who are committed to destroying Israel.
Well, I don't want to dignify this kind of blatant racism and Islamophobia and xenophobia. I'm not even going to respond to it, except to condemn it and say that this is an embarrassment and a shame on all of us here in this room. I speak as a Jew who grew up after the Holocaust. I speak as a Jew who's been very involved in standing up to stop genocide. Because when I grew up after the Holocaust, I was told that we must never let genocide happen again, not to anyone. And I grew up with that as understanding this is how we discover life after genocide. And we held accountable not only those who perpetrated genocide, but the bystanders to genocide. I want to add that Jews, Muslims, and Christians have lived together in peace for centuries. And anyone who says otherwise does not know what they are talking about. They are just spouting shameless bigotry. What disturbed the peace was not Jews, it was Zionists. Zionism is an ideology that has led to the genocide. That is the problem. That can be fixed. The world's community of nations agrees on this. The International Court of Justice agrees. Israel needs to stop the genocide, and the U.S. can stop the genocide right now with a simple phone call.
This is Dan Nowman for KPFK's Rebel Alliance News.
It is a freedom to vote. We can debate whether or not one believes that there is still democracy and a democratic process, but there is still the vote. I don't want to tell you what to do, but I do think it is important to look beyond the vote. I support real economic growth and real peace, abundance for all, anti-imperialism, and going beyond left and right. But that's up to you. What do you think?